coming back to Calais a second with regards to sort of pressure from, OGA and Evans, I actually think this is going to be the biggest test of his career, because they always say winning your first title is the hardest thing, but actually he's now got to retain it against, and so the biggest pressure is going to be on himself. Can he cope with the pressure? And we saw at times last year where, he backed off slightly, trying to leave a bit of margin because he didn't want to overstep the mark, and there was a couple of mistakes. Yeah. Can he keep himself intact now? Personally, I think he can. And he will, but
he's not shirked away from many situations that are difficult so far, has he?
But there's an element of actually this is going to be a different kind of pressure. People weren't overly surprised that Rovanperä was fighting for the title and ended up being the victor. But coming into the year, everyone, as you say, was looking at, could Elfyn do it? And in that Toyota camp, the initial focus on Elfyn, and Calais just stepped up and goes, you know what, this is what I can do. This year it's going to be, can Calais go in and win again and keep winning and keep winning.
The expectation's huge.
Yeah, and at the age that he's at as well, he hasn't got the seasoned experience behind him that a lot of champions have at that age. Or a lot of drivers have at that age. You think about when Loeb won his titles in those years, they were older than Calais. Bit more experience behind them.
He does have the maturity though.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Callie's age in a weird way is it's a falsifier in that. Yes, he's 22, but he might as well be 32.
I just think exactly what his dad said. When you talk to Harry, you talk to him as a 21, coming 22, now 22-year-old, and Harry said, no, he's in his mid-30s when you talk to him, and he is. There's at every point through last year, where Colin and I, the emotions would be up here for a win, and constantly Calais was just kept it on the level. Always, and he didn't get bogged down in, in the accident in Ypres and all of that. He just came back and he did his job. But I do think as he comes into the new season, you have to have that ability to say, right, that was last year, let's get rid of that, forget it. And there's two aspects to this for Calais, because last year was great and amazing, and he won the championship, and he should come in on the back of that wave. Okay, you can forget it, but you're still carrying that wave. That wave's carrying you into this year. But actually, it's not in some ways, because you're only as good as your last event. And Japan was a bit of a shocker for Toyota. It just didn't play out the way that Calais wanted it to. And as we said, the second half of the season, beyond sort of New Zealand, where it was dominant, and you would kind of, in a way, if there was a second half of the season event that you were expecting them to be dominant on, it was New Zealand, fast gravel rally, changeable grip levels, that sort of thing. He's in his element there. It will be interesting to see how he copes with that, the fact that he's coming in a little bit on the back foot.
I think that's the key, and it's what we haven't really seen. It's probably one of the only things we haven't seen last year in that title-winning campaign, is because I don't want to say it was easy for him at the start of the year, because by God it wasn't, and Calais was the best by miles, but all of his main rivals at that point of the year, when he was in his real run of form, were having problems. So his lead was so big so soon, it then became a management job. If, say, this year he gets beaten by his rivals on Monty, maybe he doesn't win Sweden and he's, as you say, not at the front of the field, how does he deal with that pressure of being the one that's having to fight and catch up, not the one that they're all chasing? I think that's the interesting thing. As you said, I think with Rovanperä, I don't think we can assume he can't do anything. I think he can do anything he wants to in a rally car. But it's an interesting, we can't know for sure how he'll deal with it until we've seen it.
It's funny though, the start of the season always offers a sort of get-out clause for a driver who's had a really ropey Monty in Sweden, in that you go to Mexico, you are undoubtedly in the best place on the road. You're back 7th, 8th, 9th. It's worth a second a kilometre in some places. So immediately you've got that potential for redemption, so you can go to wherever round 4 is, Portugal or somewhere, almost level on points again. But what we can't do, what Calais is a driver, he showed in Monty last year, that where he's not comfortable, where he doesn't have vast amounts of experience, he will just do his own thing. And he did. I think he was 4th or something in Monty last year, I can't remember. But what we can't do is, if he's 4th in Monty in a couple of weeks, we can't say, it's the end of the world. He's a very canny guy, and he will play to his strengths. And Monty isn't necessarily one of his strengths historically. It hasn't, unless your name's Tommy Mäkinen. Finns haven't always gone brilliantly in Monty. Again, another really interesting storyline is going to be Calais.
Yeah, and I think somebody we should mention as well that we haven't yet is one of his teammates in Takamoto Katsuta, because I guess Christmas came early for him last year, didn't it, when he got the news that he would be sharing the third Toyota. And in a weird way, it's like nothing's changed, because he's driving the same car with essentially the same mechanics and the same setup around him. He was, for all intents and purposes, a part of that factory team. And he was scoring points for a manufacturer, just it was the next generation team, I think it was called. But
that's very different, though.
Yeah, completely different.
Very different.
So at that point, he's scoring points, but there's not he's not contributing to the cause of the manufacturer, which is the whole point of the program. But this year, for half the rallies, he's going to be doing that. It'll be a real test of his progression and his sort of steel as a driver.
It's like sort of one of those situations where nothing's changed, but everything's changed, hasn't it? In a sense of it's going to be the same car, same team, same personnel, but this time it's going to be for the full works team. There's going to be more pressure on him to perform. And to be fair, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to see how he gets on, because he was Mr. Consistent last year. Yeah. I don't think there was any other driver as consistent with him over the course of the season. If he can do that in the works team, he's going to set himself up really nicely for another decent year. It's just going to be, this time, there's more pressure upon him. There's going to be more demands of, we need you to be hitting these, fourths, even rounding podiums is going to be sort of the ask now, isn't it? Of we need more than 2 podiums a year. We're going to need, 3, 4, 5. You're going to need to start delivering top 3 results regularly. Whether he can do that regularly remains to be seen. I'm not 100% sure, especially with the way the competition could be this year, that he'll necessarily do that. But I think, if he can keep knocking around on the fringes of the top 3, getting those 4ths, getting those 5ths, it'll be a really good season for him.
I think we'll see a sort of 2-pronged approach from Taka this year. I think when he's in the full factory team, then he will throttle back a bit and he will look to the finish. He'll look for a top 6. But when he's not, when Ogier's there, then he'll be full bore, absolutely at it. And again, that adds to the fact that Calais has got more rivals. Yeah. Because on his day, Taka now can be a genuine podium, potentially a rally-winning threat. And that's, on half of the rounds, there's going to be 4 Toyotas absolutely going at it, which is great. But there's no doubt, it'll be really interesting to see how Taka does cope with that stress and that pressure of driving for the full factory team. He's a Japanese driver that drives a Japanese car with a Japanese manufacturer. In Japan last year, we went on a tour of the Toyota Museum with him. And it's incredible. You sort of walk around this place with him and he fully understands the whole weight of expectation. Toyota is arguably the biggest, perhaps statistically, the biggest car maker in the world. It's massive. And he's the local hero that's got to deliver. Yeah. And just being around Taka, he's got such energy, he's such a lovely fella, but you could really sense that, crikey, everybody's looking at me, and they will be. Yeah. So he kind of gets that.
And he's been stepping up to the mark, hasn't he? Until now, he's been stepping up, he has been progressing.
But he's done it in a very sheltered fashion, and he's done it in a very protected way where, he's got away with quite a lot of stuff. And he's had some biggish accidents. Okay, yeah, he was super consistent last year. But going back the previous year, there were some fairly big shunts. But he's learned from those. Yeah. He's gone through 2 co-driver changes. And he's emerged as a. We've seen the way that he's matured out of the car and in the car. And he is. You've got to absolutely hand it to Toyota that their junior program, their WRC Challenge program has absolutely delivered incredibly. So for me, Taka needs to be looking to win rallies next year.
Yeah, I think using the word sheltered there, talking about Taka's learning environment, is quite interesting. Instantly when you said that, reminded me of Oliver Solberg, but like the opposite effect, whereas Solberg was thrust into this main Hyundai team. In hindsight, it's easy to say it was too early, but like when you're, and that's the point, isn't it, I guess, when you're driving for a manufacturer, eyes are upon you, you are expected to, you cannot, in the modern day WRC, you cannot have an off day. You have an off day, you're sent to the cleaners. It's just, it's essentially when manufacturers are paying this much money to invest in and market their products, it is ultimately unacceptable.
And to an extent, Solberg was doing all of that in the absolute limelight, in the spotlight, but he was doing it with an arm tied behind his back because he was, first, a lot of the time he was getting a test car, And you know, there's stories about the whole thing in Monte Carlo. You know, that test car had exactly that issue on the test, with the fumes coming into the car. Yet he was expected to live with it on the rally. You know, there was a lot. He wasn't given his own setups. He wasn't given enough time to test the car. Blah 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 blah. Ultimately, he was a young driver who was given an opportunity, but the actual context of that opportunity isn't widely known. That it was a very difficult time for him. He was kind of thrown into the lion's den a little bit. For me, it was too early. He should have spent another year in a Rally 2 car and come on for this year. It was, but I think, you know, Oliver he's a driver who's got pace, he's got ability, he's got confidence. A year of WRC2, he will bounce back. You know, does he have to absolutely dominate WRC2 championship? Not at all. You know, he just needs to be consistently there, consistently quick, and demonstrate what he can do. And for me, you know, we have absolutely not seen the last of Oliver Solberg, but it contrasted starkly with the way that Toyota had brilliantly run their program. And again, talk to Adamo now. It was Andrea Adamo that signed Oliver Solberg, and Adamo looked on in horror as he saw what they were doing with Solberg's program. You know, that wasn't what he intended for it. So, you know, everything just adjusted slightly. And also, you know, in Hyundai's defence, we've said they were massively on the back foot. You know, they actually didn't have another car. It wasn't that they wanted to just keep palming Oliver off with a test car. It was all they'd got. You know, they took them so. They had that massive shunt with Thierry just in December where he trashed that chassis. So they had to, you know, whatever was going to be chassis number one for Monty then suddenly had to step up and become probably the test chassis. So it was a whole bunch of things that came together to provide the perfect storm for them. And Oliver just was in the right place at definitely the wrong time.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick interlude here and say, if you want to find out if Oliver is faster than his father Petter around the dirt of his rally school, there is a video, a very entertaining video, as we said, on the channel at the moment. So go check that out after you've watched this. But Rob, I'll come to you. I know you were going to say something there, but I'm going to angle you with a question. I'm going to pretend I'm a host for a second. We've mentioned it there. He is in WRC2 this year, Solberg. Probably many would expect in the best seat in the house with a TalkSport new Skoda Fabia. Is he the obvious favourite to win? And as David said, does he have to win to progress his career?
I think, yeah, he has to win. I don't think there's any doubts about that. If he wants to get back at the Rally 1, in a Rally 1 car, he has to show that he's capable of winning championships. And, you know, right now, you know, he hasn't won the WRC2 title yet. You know, he needs to tick that box. And, you know, this is the problem, isn't it? Where you've got so many drivers like Calais coming in so young and performing at such a high level, like the pressure just gets harder and harder. You know, gone are the days where you can spend a few years developing and then suddenly hit the mark. You've got to be straight on it. So I think the only way Solberg's career is really going to sort of have any longevity at the top level is if he can go and nail that championship.
I've got to jump in here. I would agree with that if it was a conventional championship, if it was 6 rounds, everybody doing the same 6 rounds. But for me, it doesn't matter if he doesn't win because, you know, with the greatest of respect to Kaito Kaitanovic, he came within an ace of being this year's WRC2 champion. So does that make him a more interesting proposition to a manufacturer than Andreas Mikkelsen or than Mads Osberg or any of these? The way the WRC2 championship works, for me, it doesn't work. You know, the fact that the drivers can still go and avoid each other, take a very strategic approach to the overseas rounds and all of that stuff, it undermines the importance of the WRC2 title. So, you know, who's to say that Oliver's, you know, runs a very European-based and he's constantly up against, I don't know if Mikkelsen's coming, Lindholm, Sami Pajari,
all the best
all of
drivers,
these incredible drivers, Teemu Sunninen. And he wins a couple of times, but then he's sort of second, third, fourth. And then you get, you know, somebody else who goes and does all of the overseas rounds. They win the championship. For me, you know, that the FIA needs to sort that out and sort it out quickly. It's a problem that we've seen for 10 years or so. There has to be a way around it. I understand the issues that, you know, all of the rounds want as many entries as they can. I get all of the issues, but what we're interested in here is who's the fastest Rally 2 driver.
You can probably give a slightly different target because Formo's back in Rally 2 this year. I mean, you'd expect that they're probably going to be on similar sort of programs in terms of what rallies they're going to be attending. You'd think Solberg and Formo probably in the main,
but who knows?
Similar. Well, yeah,
you just don't know.
But if that's the case, as you say, if you say, well, actually, the title doesn't matter. If he ends up on a similar program of attendance with Formo, he's got to be Formo, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's
absolutely
right. That's that, and this is a frustration partly from me that if you're, and this is what Mickelson was saying, when he was coming up, if you were a driver that was wanting to make their name, you would look out for the rallies where the lead drivers were, and you would get in there and say, right, I'm going to show you. This is me. This is what I can do. And I would like to think that Oliver will be exactly like that. To go away and do safari or some of the long haul events. A win it's not meaningless, of course it's not. But it's not the same as going to Monte or to Portugal and fighting tooth and nail. And the top 6 WRC 2 cars split by sort of 5 or 6 seconds on Saturday night. That's what we want. And that, that for me is, like you say, Rob, it's far more meaningful to look on an event by event basis. And that was kind of my thoughts, that he doesn't need to win the championship, but what he does need to do is demonstrate his speed, consistency on every round that he does against meaningful competition.
And the same goes for Formo, doesn't it? Because
he
was trying to revive that career back at M Sport.
Yeah.
It all went horribly wrong for him last year.
Whilst I don't understand the thinking, I kind of do, but it just doesn't sit comfortably with me, this WRC2 thing. The competition in WRC2 is going to be mega. Yeah. It's going to be an absolute ripper of a season.
Yeah, there's so many contenders, and there's guys we haven't even talked about the reigning champion yet, for example, and that's the thing.
And he's still very much in the ascendancy now.
Yeah.
He's learning, he's getting quicker. He, and again, is in the right place at the right time with TalkSport. You can't give enough credit to what Skoda's achieved with that new car. It's a thing of beauty, and it's, Hyundai, M Sport, the other manufacturers, they've got work to do.
Yeah, you've got Lindholm, you've got one of his teammates, Sami Pajari. As I said, we've mentioned Formo, Solberg, and there's always, I'm sure Stefan Lefebvre is doing some. There's always a litany of drivers that will crop up. So in a way, it's almost as good as field in a sense.
Chris Meek, potentially.
Yeah, well, this is it, and wouldn't that be amazing? Chris Meek, Solberg, Formo on the same route. It would be incredible. But just referencing Formo, there's another driver we haven't actually talked about yet, which is Pierre-Louis Loubet, who I was going to say unofficially has taken Formo's drive. He hasn't worked like that. But Loubet had an 8-round European-only season. Now he's in a full-time driver, which is the opportunity Formo had last year. Loubet, I think he's won a lot of people round last year, hasn't he? With the turnaround, and I think everybody knew he had a bit of a difficult situation with an older car in the previous 2 years, but he maybe didn't make the best of it himself either. So there was maybe a couple of questions. But last year, apart, I think Croatia was maybe difficult, but it was punctures weren't really his fault at the start. But everything was consistent. He led rallies, he won a stage, and to me, this feels like a very well-earned opportunity. I guess the key now is that he builds on it.
So that's the thing for me. With Loubet's season last year, he actually really impressed me. I know we don't quite agree on this, haven't spoken about it off camera, but I actually think he could be a dark horse this year. I think there's a lot of potential there, especially with M Sport essentially at the moment, as far as we know, 2-car entry in terms of Tanak and Loubet on Sideridis as a 3rd car. But I think it's predominantly, a 2-car works team, if you like. And I think working on that basis with a smaller team, it could help Loubet in a sense of there's not so many drivers got to be shared around, with Greensmith or with Breen as well as himself and Formo at times. So it's a bit more compact, and there's a working relationship with Tanak could prove potentially quite good. I mean, I think there's a lot for him to learn, but I think he could actually step up and, if he can continue on the path that he was on last year, I think he could step up and actually have a solid season.
I think as well, you can't underplay the fact that it was the move into M Sport and that really kind of family-oriented environment. He found the Puma, quite a progressive, quite an easier car to drive, and it all just played to his strengths, didn't it? And one of the many things that M Sport and Malcolm Wilson is brilliant at is bringing on young drivers. We've seen it historically with the likes of Francois Duval and Marco Martin. Petter Solberg started there. All of these drivers, Malcolm knows how to bring them on. And he's done that with Pierre-Louis. We now need to see the next step. Places like Acropolis, he was brilliant. Way exceeded the expectations. Even, a good place to start on the road. But taking that into consideration, he was still there fighting.
You take into account the road order, as you say, but even then he was still the fastest M Sport driver.
Yeah. No, he does have a real opportunity. And even better, if there is any potential for Sebastian Loeb coming back, to work with a guy like Loeb is gold dust, isn't it, for Loubet? And that's one of the things that he really benefited from through last year. And he will continue to benefit if they manage to get that deal across the line to bring Loeb back to the team. But I think M Sport, it's very, very clear this year. They have those two drivers. They've got Tanak. They're chasing the Drivers' Championship. It's a really exciting season in prospect for them. And there's no baggage around with M Sport. They're a very lean team because they have to be. They're a very efficient team. And they can do it. And as we said at the top of this thing, Tanak will push them incredibly hard, harder than anybody going back to Sébastien Ogier in 17-18. It'll be right back to that place for them. M Sport is a leaner team than it was pre-COVID because Malcolm was forced to make some redundancies. Literally the company was on the line. And if he didn't get rid of some of these people, the company potentially wouldn't have existed. So he's had to. So we've seen the likes of, the logistics, Ian Tully, the tyre engineer, George Black, who'd been there 100 years. And George is the most amazingly knowledgeable guy about tyres. He's seen every aspect of every condition in Monty. He knows everything. So there will be an element. Yes, I talked about this with Tanak and said, do you worry a little bit that there's a less experience within the engineering and all of that side of the team? And he said, no, because, you trade that experience for a leaner, more hungry, younger bunch of guys and girls that we've got there now. Who's to say they haven't got even better ideas and an even better approach? So it's great. I can't wait. It's amazing to see Tanak back at M Sport, the relationship that he has with the Wilson family, not just with Malcolm. When we saw he crashed in Monty at the start of last year, he didn't restart on Sunday. And Oik just happened to notice that the TV cameras were around M Sport, obviously, as we were going into those last stages. And it just happened that Oik chose that moment to go and stand and chat with Malcolm and Elaine and Matthew. And he knows what he's doing. But he's said to us plenty of times that he is the sort of stepson to Malcolm. He's part of the furniture. He's part of the family there. And it's great to see him back.
I mean, I think that there is an element that it's kind of all or bust in some respects, or could be all or bust for M Sport. In a sense of it's great that Tanak is back there, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. And Tanak's got the credibility. He's champion. He's won the title before. He knows exactly what it takes to win. Give him the car, he will be there or thereabouts. But I think if he falls short of that, and we know the Puma inherently was fast last year. Obviously Loeb won it straight out on Monty. There are plenty of other times that it was one of the faster cars out there. I think just questions. If Tanak isn't fighting for the title or in the hunt, I think questions will then start to ask: well, can M Sport actually get themselves back into position to fight for titles again in the future? Because if they can't do it with the Puma and Tanak, as a combination, are they able to be able to get themselves into a position to do it again? I think this is the best opportunity for them. I think if they can do it, I think they'll fly and we will see a really strong revival from M Sport. But there is that risk that if it doesn't quite work, how does this fare for them for the future?
I think, M Sport is a hand-to-mouth team right now, isn't it? There's no denying that. They manage themselves at... Always, there's many times when I've said to Malcolm, why are you in WRC? Why run a World Rally car? It costs so much. Wouldn't you be better just to do essentially what Skoda's done and just focus on a customer program of selling Rally 2 cars? But Malcolm's insistent that the pinnacle Rally 1, the World Rally Championship, is his shop window. You win on Sunday in Rally 1 and you sell on Monday in Rally 2. That's the thinking. And of course you need to win on Sunday with Rally 2 as well. But it is such a different position and different perspective that M Sport brings, that, you know, you see the blue oval there, but Ford put a huge amount of effort of engineering, development and everything into the Puma. But the actual running of the car sits with Malcolm. You know, he has to find a way. And this is why the whole Tanak thing took so long, because he'd got to find a way to fund it ultimately. And that's not easy, you know, when you're looking for, particularly in a time of a kind of global recession that we're in now, it's not easy to find millions of pounds to run a rally team. I have no doubt that M Sport has the wherewithal and the ability within those walls to put together a Drivers' Championship. I think it's entirely, it would be just not sensible in any way to consider them as manufacturers, potential manufacturer champions. They don't have the depth. Even if Loeb steps up and does 4 or 5 or 6 rallies, they still don't have that consistent third driver scoring points for them. But Drivers' Championship 100%. I can see your point that, you know, are the potential ramifications that if they can't do it this year, will they struggle? I don't think they will, because we've seen them go through these lean periods in 2005 when they had Gardemeister and Cresta. Then, you know, there was the lean years after 2012, you know, when I can't remember when they had Novikov and these kind of people coming in. They've been through that. They've been through the tough times. They've come out the other side as world champions again. They can totally do it. We know there's some more engine development coming that was held over from pretty much the middle of last year. That's coming in time for Monty. There's lots coming on the car. And one thing is for sure, that Tanak wouldn't have signed up for them if he couldn't see a clear development path through the rest of this season. He knows he's going to have a good car in Monty, good car in Sweden, good car in Mexico, but he needs to know that when he's getting to Japan at the end of the year, that car is still absolutely, you know, his knife is as sharp as anybody else's. Come the end of the year. He wouldn't have gone there if he didn't know that.
He looks even hungrier to me than he ever has done for a world champion, even perhaps more so than when he wasn't even a world champion. I think having been the world champion in 19, those years with Hyundai, it just didn't work out for various reasons. I think that he's really wants this. And as you say, I don't think he would have gone there if he didn't think that it was possible. But I have to say, I think your point is really interesting, because as you said, the team it's not completely different, but there are different things there. There are... Last year with Craig Breen, there's probably various factors and probably things that none of us know about as to why things didn't work out. Was it a fault on both sides potentially? We don't really know. It's not worth speculating about. It's in the past. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works. But as you say, Tanak clearly sees something within that team, and he's right to, because Malcolm Wilson, everybody there, they're born winners. They know how, they don't just forget all this know-how over the years of how to build. And we know the car is quick. We saw it last year that the car was there. It's just a development race now, isn't it, really, between them, Toyota and Hyundai. Sorry,
and I think you say that, you know, Tanak seems hungrier, and I think you're right, and I think he is, and I think it's probably because he can see that he can beat Rovanperä. In a sense of, you saw the back end of the year, he was giving Callie a good run for his money, able to be on rallies, and he sat there going, actually, this is my best chance in years to actually get one over on him. You know, he must be sort of really ruined the fact that Hyundai wasn't set up at the start of last year, because he could have probably run it right down to the wire with Callie, had the car been there. So I think he clearly knows that actually, you know, this year could be the year to get that second title, and he's got the bit between his teeth. But you know, that just makes it even more exciting, doesn't it? You've got 3 drivers sat there who really think they've got one hand on this championship if they can get a good start to the season, and that's what I enjoy about it.
And there's no doubt that the 3 years that Tanak spent at Hyundai, it's given him massive frustration. You know, he went there in 2020 as a world champion, ready to jump straight in and continue and look for a back-to-back championship, and then immediately that huge accident in Monty. It didn't really bother him though, did it? Because, you know, he was bang on the pace in Sweden, but he definitely, there is frustration, and he will see those as 3 wasted years, but it just brings more impetus to what he wants to do at the start of this season and through this season. The one guy that we haven't really perhaps spoken enough about, 2 guys, is those other guys at Hyundai, is Sordo and Brini. Sordo, nicest guy in the championship, will do a fabulous job, undoubtedly. Danny, we absolutely love you. Great to see you back. For Craig, he has another job to do now. There will be a big spotlight on him when he comes to Sweden. He needs to demonstrate that he can get back on the horse and absolutely ride it again. It was the most terrible, terrible time for him at the back end of pretty much throughout the last year. It couldn't have gone more wrong, And when you look at he could have missed out on the Monty podium and other things, but it was just not the way it was meant to be.
No.
And now he needs a bit of a reset. He needs to get himself back to where he was when he was at Hyundai previously, and he can do it. Now maybe the pressure's gone, or some of the pressure's gone. So let's just see what Craig can do. But again, another interesting story.
Well, it must be a really strange place to be mentally, because you mentioned for Tanak how he might see the Hyundai years as wasted years. Essentially, Breen he's taken that big ticket move, but he's back where he was 2 years ago. So in a way, and it sounds a bit flippant to say it, but he's almost like made no progress. He's back where he was. But I think this is the interesting thing now, as we get to answer the question, really, because last year seems really strange. Like, I think retrospectively, we can all look at it and say maybe we put too much pressure on him externally, because the form was so good at the end of 2021, but there was a lot of things different for doing a part-time season and rallies he knew well to having to lead a team essentially into a new era. So that was a massive step for anyone to jump into.
I've just got to say here, Luke, you made the odd good point in the last 3 years, but actually that point is absolutely on the money in that where is Craig's head now going into it? He needs to get rid of that baggage of, I've wasted a year, which ultimately, I've wasted a year. A year has gone by when it was the golden ticket in terms of his career, across the spread of his career. He's now got to get rid of that, and he's got to, like you say, he's got to take 2 steps back to take a big jump forward now. And it is how he copes with that. And I'm sure, he's got a strong support network around him. And ultimately, you look at a driver like Craig, he's been on the floor, genuinely on the floor. He has been through darker times than anything that last year could have thrown at him, and he's bounced back. So he has the wherewithal to come back. He has the desire. He has the speed. And it's just, we want to see him back as well, because there is nothing better than a chirpy Craig Breen. No. He's absolutely brilliant. He's a joy. He's always a joy to deal with. He's one of the most ruthlessly honest, decent people that you can ever work with in the sport. And the whole family, Ray, his father, they're all like that. And it was great with Nagel alongside him as well. But yeah, to see Craig winning, to see Craig back on the podium, it would be magnificent.
He's in a similar camp to Solberg though, isn't he? In a sense of they've both got to spend this year trying to work out how to revive their careers again. Going from being team leader back to a part-time season, he's got to hit the reset button, show what he can do so he can hit the reboot and get going again properly for 2024. Given Tako's rate of development, I think there's every opportunity that he could get a win somewhere.
Who do we think is going to be the 2023 World Rally Champion? David Evans.
Oi, Tanak.
I knew you were going to say Oi, Tanak.